Hi, everybody. This is Saad for the Sad Truth. I just retweeted an article from the New York Times that was posted on Jordan Peterson's feed regarding the dangers of bureaucracies, or rather the sort of the oversight that bureaucracies place on their subjects. I haven't read the article yet, but right after that, I posted a comment saying that I have myself fought bureaucratic oversight at my own university, and I believe that to their credit, they listened, paid attention, and tried to make some changes. So I thought that I would maybe share with you two stories from my own academic career. So the first instance, so I have a chaired professorship. It's a university-wide chaired called the Concordia University Research Chair in Evolutionary Behavioral Sciences and Darwinian Consumption. I know it's a mouthful. And part of holding that chair, which I'm very thankful for having, is that you have to submit progress reports, saying what is it that you've done over the past year and so on. At one point, I used to receive uh, requests for progress reports from different groups at the university. In one case, it might be the Office of Research Services. In another case, it might be the dean's office in the business school. In another case, it might be some university-wide. I can't remember exactly all the details, but I think I was receiving at one point three separate requests, if memory serves me right, to fill out progress reports. Now, of course, some of the contents of those progress reports would be similar, but in other cases, you had to answer specific questions that were idiosyncratic to each of the requesting uh, office. And so I would end up spending an inordinate amount of time simply reporting, uh, you know, what I had been doing over the past year, which would end up being incredibly inefficient because I was spending as much time filling out progress reports as I was actually uh, making progress. I'm being hyperbolic a bit, but you get the point. At one point, I had written an article, a typical sort of Gaddism type article, where I had said, "Hey, why don't?" And I had sent it to quite a few very senior folks. And I said, "Hey, why don't we, increase the bureaucratic oversight so that you ask me to submit a report on a daily basis. Every day from 9 to 12, I can work on my research, and then I spend the rest of the afternoon filling out a progress report, what I did that morning, and I could send you a report like that on a daily basis." Again, I use this kind of satire, this kind of cutting satire, because it speaks to a reality, which is that oftentimes these administrators become truly oppressive in the manner by which they constantly intervene to do everything they can to make your life more miserable, more managed, more oversight, and so on and so forth. So that was one example. There are many others that I could list, but I'll discuss only one other. So in the second case, those of you who have done research either with animals or humans, of course, humans are also animals, will know that whenever you conduct research, you have to pass a ethics review board. In the US, I think they call them IRBs, institutional review boards, where you fill out an application whereby you demonstrate that you will abide by the relevant ethical precepts, that you will not be harming any animals or any humans, and so on and so forth. Of course, the original uh, idea behind having such oversight was a good one because, for example, in the case of the behavioral sciences, where I reside in terms of my work, uh, there were quite a few classic experiments, say in the 50s, 60s, 70s, where researchers could conduct experiments that might end up having quite a bit of damage to the participants, but the ethical standards were sufficiently lax that people could carry them out, and this was known as the golden era of psychology because you could do pretty much anything you wanted and get away with it. Classic examples would be the the Milgram experiment, the obedience to authority experiment, the obedience to roles, the Zimbardo experiment, with the prisoners and the corrections officers, the Solomon Asch experiment with conformity to to group pressure. There's false feedback experiments, where you tell somebody, oh, you just took an IQ test. Well, you basically score dumber than a squirrel. Oh, okay, let's move on now and have you do these mathematical tests. The point is to check what happens when you provide somebody with false feedback on their downstream effect of some other task that they have to do. Then, of course, after you would debrief them, you would tell them, oh, don't worry, it's not really true. There wasn't an IQ test. But the person would never know whether what you're now saying is true or not. And so they could walk away feeling permanently injured by the fact that they don't know whether it is really true that they are dumb as a squirrel or not. And so for all of these examples and many others, universities instituted a protocol by which you have to absolutely ensure that by no way are you going to harm any animal and or participant. If you are going to, for example, do stuff with animals, there's a protocol how to handle them. If you are going to do stuff with humans, there's a set of parameters, a code of ethics by which you have to abide, and that's fine. The problem is that, as often happens with something that starts off with as a good idea, bureaucracy comes in. Where bureaucracies go, innovation dies, creativity dies, totalitarianism sets in, and so now, 20, 30 years down the line, that process has become unbelievably brutal in terms of its oversight. So, you can't ask about income because it might offend somebody. Of course, now, as I mentioned during my Canadian Senate remarks, maybe asking about somebody's biological sex might be viewed as transphobic systemic violence because it promulgates fixed binaries and biological essentialism. You can't ask about this, you can't ask about that, because it offends people, right? So what started off as a good idea now becomes something that is so oppressive that asking them what their name is might become, well, usually you don't ask what their name is, but whatever, asking them anything can be construed as offensive. And then the review boards are quite random in how they view your application. So depending on the group of individuals who are going to review your ethics approval documents, you'll either sail through it, or you'll have some folks who are absolutely impossible to deal with. So for example, a few years ago, I was doing a study with one of my graduate students where we were going to manipulate disgust, either moral disgust or sexual disgust or pathogenic disgust, and we were doing it in an unbelievably innocuous manner. I mean, this is about as tame an experiment as one could imagine. And someone came along and said, but what if somebody has generalized anxiety disorder and then somehow they're disgusted, this might trigger them, and you need to have a clinical psychologist and so on. And off we went to the races for the next 9,000 years dealing with this frivolous request. And so that itself has become a problem. But now let's push it a bit further. In the past, when I used to have to do ethics clearance process, it was for actual scientific research that's being conducted either for my own scientific research or work that I'm doing with my graduate students, let's say if they're completing their master's thesis or their doctoral dissertations. But research that was conducted in the context of the pedagogy of my coursework was not under the purview of ethical clearance. In other words, in all my courses, undergraduate, MSc, MBA, PhD, I always have a research project where students have to propose a research question, posit some hypotheses, develop the data collection procedures, collect the data, analyze the data, and come to some conclusions. So they're really going through the whole research process. The ethical clearance in the case of class projects used to be conducted by myself, by the individual professor who's teaching the course. In my case, I would teach them what the ethical standards are, and I would make sure that they adhere to those standards when they're collecting the data. Then the university came along and said, no, this is no longer sufficient. You need to have external oversight. So even when you are conducting class projects, now remember, a class is 13 weeks. So now you'd have to have the students, after they've decided what their topic is going to be, and of course, oftentimes they're new to this process, so they don't know exactly what their research project is going to be. It changes a bit and so on. They have to fill out formally these forms. I have to collect them. And at first, I only would look at them. Then the university said, no, no, no. You have to collect all these forms from all the students, send them to a third independent party who's outside of our classroom. Then he or she has to give you clearance, and then it comes back to you, and then the students can do their class projects, which of course would require a tremendous amount of time. Now imagine if one of these group projects or class projects, they're missing some information, so it always has to go to this third party. But the class is going. It's a 13-week class. We don't have time to go back and forth. Plus, it's insulting, and that suddenly the university is saying the individual professor somehow doesn't have the ability to impart those ethical guidelines to his or her students. It has to go through another oversight committee, even in the context of class projects. And so I complained about this with the Office of Research, and I had a representative come to our departmental meeting where I raised these concerns. And as far as I know, from what I know last, we no longer have to have this third-party oversight for class projects. So of course it's important to teach the students the guidelines for proper ethical procedures when it comes to conducting research, but we don't need to create a breathtakingly inane and overbearing oversight from 73,000 layers of bureaucracy just so that a student can complete his or her coursework in a class. So this is exactly what we mean when we say that where bureaucracies go, death ensues. Okay, so those are my examples for aspiring academics and young academics who are already in their professional careers. It is important that you speak out because, believe me, there is no end to which a bureaucracy will go to suck the life out of you. And your job is to hold their feet to the fire. Of course, there should be oversight, but reasonable oversight. But the reality is, a bureaucracy doesn't know when to stop, so they will continue intruding into your every single second, into every single minutia, until, in many cases, professors become completely disillusioned. Well, not this professor, I fight back. And as I said, to the credit of my university, they've always certainly listened to my concerns, and where they thought it reasonable, have certainly tried to accommodate my concerns. So there you have it, folks. Always speak out, hopefully constructively, politely, with reason, but speak out. Hope you're having a good week. Talk to you soon. Ciao.